but I'd encourage more of you to join in and make comments and really kind of comment on the presentations, share your insights as you're thinking of them. It just enriches the experience for everyone. And again, Leah Reisman, Leah, I say your name wrong every time, I'm sorry. We'll be doing a session tomorrow with us at 2:30 to kind of synthesize the last couple days and really think about what the peer learning networks are that you want to be putting together, and then also get your feedback just on how you want to learn together going forward. One other quick housekeeping note, our closed captioning link is over in the chat. If you need closed captioning, you can click on that. We're also recording these as transcripts, so that will also be available. Okay, you can change the slide. So Terry Schwartz is going to join us in a moment to talk about artist commissioning and community consultant commissioning through the lens of a project that she worked on in Cleveland. No, actually, sorry, I got that wrong. Through the lens of a project she worked on sorry, I didn't eat my lunch and that was showing up. Okay, I'm going to just start by going through our curriculum slides. These are some slides that we put together to share. Just they're really basic overviews. Many of you on this call have done this work before. You know about all of these different methodologies around putting out calls for creative placemaking and for arts and cultural development and artist calls. I'm going to quickly run through some of these things because you're all familiar with them, and then these slides will be available for those of you who want to dig into them again later. So Joe, you can go ahead and turn the page. So we're going to just start by defining your approach to your calls for artists, for your calls for qualifications and that kind of thing. So one of the things that we want to kind of do, and now I wish I was changing the slides myself, you can go ahead, Joe, is really think about what process you should use in your call for artists. What do you need to accomplish in the call? What are the legal requirements that you may be beholden to, especially if you're a city agency or you are using this Our Town grant, which does have legal requirements around RFPs and requirements for putting things out to bid. Do you already have a scope of work, or are you creating that scope of work with the community? Are you hiring artists or consultants? What kinds of selection process is necessary where you're working and in the agency that you're working in? A nonprofit may have less binding legislation than a city government does. So really, what kind of selection process do you need to use? And what timeframes and deadlines are you going to be working under? So that's just really important to understand as you go into this. And I think it's particularly important for each partner to understand what the partner's requirements are, because again, like a city government is going to have one set of requirements and a nonprofit might have another. And so it's really important that you talk about these things up front. You can go ahead, Joe. So the first type of call for artists is a call for entry. And this is always what we usually think about with a call for entry is that it really reaches a broad and diverse set of applicants. It builds momentum for an event if you're doing a large scale event. It allows flexibility in timelines. You can make it a long or a short process. It's not beholden to any specific set of requirements by government. And it creates it just helps you create uniformity in your application process. So in general, a call for entry would be something that on the smaller scale with a smaller budget. So, if you're thinking of like small, easy kind of like not easy, but small basic projects that you're trying to get going that are, there's a $500 stipend or $1,000, you would use a call for entry. You can go to the next slide. And most of you already know all these things. So I'm gonna whip through these things. When we think about a commission, we're really thinking about commissioning an arts organization or an artist to do a specific project for the larger project that you're working on. In a commission, you really have more curatorial control. You're actually just choosing upfront the organization that you're going to work with. You're negotiating a contract with them or perhaps the agent of the artist. It gives you know, it gives you more selection control. You're not putting a panel together. You're just deciding as a curator that this is a piece that you want. The image here is it was a performance in a festival in Providence by RPM Voices. Oftentimes when we think of commissions, we think of commissioning high-end artists who have, you know, have been performing nationally, but you can also work with local organizations to do commissions if that falls within the guidelines of the project and the agency that you're working in. We had a lot of curatorial leeway in Providence sometimes, so that we were able to do commissions of local organizations. It gives artists a runway to create new work. It gives artists it provides the fact that you have confidence in them, in their abilities. It allows them to be creative and create something with a longer runway. And it also allows a negotiation to take place between the artist and the commissioning agency, unlike a call or an RFQ where there's going to be a set group of guidelines. And it creates a sense of artistic excitement. So when you're commissioning a group or you're commissioning a national artist, it creates a sense of excitement around your project. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is the one we're going to kind of dig into, because this is the one that has probably the most bearing on a lot of the work that you're doing. A request for qualifications can be used by city government. It can also be used by any other government agency, but it also is something that a nonprofit can use. And it is often required by law or by your grant requirements. Generally, when you have a request for qualifications, you're also providing a budget limit, but you're not actually asking for an RFP, which is a request for proposals. It allows you to vet consultants' qualifications and see if they're going to fit in with the project you're doing, and gives you a little more leeway in terms of negotiating with them later around the actual proposal. It allows the organization to get a solid understanding of how the relationship will work. You can really dig into how you would, you know, as you go through the request for qualification, you can do interviews with different people, and then and then be able to sort of decide whether they're going to be a good fit for you in your work. And it's also great to use if the community is driving the process and it can't be prescribed in an RFP. So in an RFP, you're going to get real granular, but in a request for qualifications, it can be a little bit more open-ended. And the community can actually have a little bit more control over driving the process after the fact that you've hired the consultant. And it allows to have a stable of vetted consultants that are available when needed. For example, we did a request for qualifications for our resource team because we didn't have the exact prescription of what they were going to be doing, but we wanted to know what their qualifications were, and that's how we chose folks to participate. You can go to the next slide. And then the other thing is that you want to think about developing a request for qualification that reflects the goals and values that drive the project. And in doing that, these are sort of some of the pieces of the RFQ that you want to think about. You want to always have an introduction and a project description. You want to be transparent about the partners and who they are and what their roles are in the project. You want to indicate the range of our artistic disciplines or consultancy types that you want to define to react to the defined problem that you're trying to solve, or the project that you've created, that you've outlined. You want to include history and demographics of the neighborhood in the project area, just so people understand where they're working. You want to have a project vision that outlines the values and the placemaking process as a tool for the work and how you're going to approach collaboration. You want to have purposes and goals. For example, meet the community needs, bring people together to increase safety if that's your goal. So you want to outline what the purpose and the goal of the project is. And then eligibility, and that may define where the artist resides, the years of experience, their work in the community, and that's sort of you set those guidelines. And then you, in some cases, want to ask the folks that are responding to the RFQ to provide a letter of intent with examples of how they might engage the community, of how they might approach the project. And of course, you want a portfolio and references. collecting these RFQs then gives you an opportunity to interview the people that sort of reach the top and then make that relationship. You can go to the next slide, Joe. One of the things you want to make sure with the RFQ is that you're getting the word out as far and wide as possible. I think most of you know how to do this, so I'm not going to go into this slide very much. But I think one of the things that's really important is to really work with your community partners to get the word out. Think about who you want to respond to the RFQ, and then make sure you're getting it in their hands. And also have the RFQ available in multiple languages so that people can respond accordingly. I think that's just a really important thing, if possible, to do that, particularly if you're trying to reach diverse communities. And then finally, I think, Joe, you can go to the next slide. And so we focused on an RFQ, but I just want to quickly go through requests for proposals and just really dive into one specific piece about a request for proposals, and then we're going to turn it over to Terry to really present her her case study. Requests for proposals are really important for people to understand that are outside government. If you're working with a government partner and the money is funneling through the government partner, you're really going to end up having to go with a request for proposals if it's over a certain amount of money. Many city governments and state agencies are required by law or the grant requirements to go out to use a request for proposals process. In Providence, it was for anything over $3,500. We had to go out for a request for proposals. That's defined by the city, ordinance. And in some cases, it may be up to $10,000, or each city and each grant has its own requirements, so you have to be really careful about that.
And just to chime in, our town award, the policy is that we default to your policy. So just to clarify that.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, I was actually gonna you can go to the next slide, actually, Joe. So in terms of working within a request for proposals format, it's really important to understand that there are going to be binding kind of timelines on putting a request for proposal out. I show this city bid timeline because I think it's really important to understand that it can take up to 3 months. You start by crafting the RFP, you request the post to bid. That's a formal process that goes through city government. The bid gets posted, it gets publicized in a specific way that the city government has said it has to get posted in. And then people reply to the bid, and then the bids are opened publicly. Now, in that bid posting period, it's really important that you help get the word out that that bid is posted. You can't just rely on the city agency to do that posts the bids, because it may go to a very limited amount of people. So you still want to do like you do with an RFQ, really, get it out to the community, let them understand it's been posted. Then those bids are publicly opened. And oftentimes the bidding agency, the bidding commission will say that the 3 lowest bids will be the ones you have to choose from. Then they're sent to the department to make a choice, and then the bid is awarded and given out to whoever wins the bid. In this process, you have to be really creative in some ways, working with the commission that's opening the bids and really helping them understand the guidelines and what you're trying to do. So that's just a process. Every city government does it a different way, but I put this slide in for the folks who aren't in government to understand that this process can take a while. You can go to the next slide, Joe. And then when you're putting out an RFP, it's very legalese. There's a lot of contractual terms and conditions in it. Although an RFQ should also have the same thing when you finally go to contract stage. But these are just some of the things you need to think about: the terms and the conditions, the requirements, the evaluation and the award process, just like I laid out, the schedule, and then they always require points of contact for future correspondence. So that's all just kind of the bones of an RFP. I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Terry, and she's really going to dig into a project that she did recently with an Our Town grant. So take it away, Terry, and you can switch to the next slide, Joe.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be with you this afternoon. I'm going to talk just briefly about a project that we worked on in Youngstown, Ohio, which is about an hour and a half away from Cleveland, where our organization is based. In the past, kind of my organization, which is part of Kent State, we've sometimes been the applicant for projects. We've sometimes been a contractor for projects. In this particular case, we were advisors. Youngstown State University and the city of Youngstown received a $100,000 Our Town grant, which they matched with local funds, in order to create 5 public art installations in the city of Youngstown, particularly in the downtown area and the Youngstown State campus. So they awarded 5 $20,000 grants to teams of artists, and we were involved as part of the technical support team. We were just called the support group, which was kind of funny because sometimes it felt like we were providing more emotional and moral support than technical support, because a lot of the teams of artists who were selected for this project had never kind of worked on something like this before. So I can just show you a little bit. Can we go to the next slide about what it was all about? Oh, so this was, an Our Town grant, but also funding from all of these funders. We can go to the next one. So our role in it initially at the CUDC was to work with the city and the university to identify where they wanted this opportunity to be. So this even predated the application for the Our Town grant. We did a sort of small scale planning process, a design charrette, to identify where the opportunities for public art would be, focusing on blank spaces, connections, bridges, which there are a lot of in Youngstown, and the riverfront, the waterfront. We can go to the next one. So blank spaces, there you go. There's a lot of blank walls in Youngstown, and we go to the next one. Parking lots. So where there used to be buildings, there are now vacant lots and parking lots in the downtown area. So this was another focus area. We mapped all these kind of potential art locations. Next, please. I just showed you this because you should know how beautiful Youngstown is. It's really a beautiful place, but there are all these kind of hidden opportunities. So this was another area that the Our Town grant was intended to highlight. Next, please. Also, Youngstown has one of these. It's kind of an overpass, an unfinished bridge. So it just sort of stops. And so it created yet another opportunity for placemaking and public art. Next. And this is what it looks like from the top. I'm sorry, I probably included too many sort of sightseeing pictures of Youngstown. You should visit sometime when the world's a little more normal. So if we go to the next. So one of the things that we did with the city and the university was to put together a guideline book. And if it would be helpful to you, I'd be happy to drop this into the chat. It was what was provided to all of the potential sub-awardees from this grant. Basically, what we asked people to do was to kind of think about a project that could fall into one of these categories: wayfinding, mobility and parking, lighting, technology, and green infrastructure. Now, the important thing about the Youngstown In Place grant was that, or project, was that individuals couldn't be awarded one of these grants. It had to be teams, and there needed to be at least one Youngstown resident on each team. So the artists could come from anywhere, but they needed to be anchored by at least one, kind of local resident. So if we go to the next one. So there were, kind of several of these information sessions, all really well attended, because, the opportunity for $20,000 to kind of put your creative vision, forth in your community was really appealing to a lot of people. So the initial meetings were primarily, kind of individuals coming to learn about the project. And then if we go to the next one. Later meetings, you started to see groups starting to form, people who were like sitting next to each other at the meetings, or people reaching out to, friends, collaborators to create these kinds of teams. We go to the next. It all culminated in, kind of clusters of artists and residents putting together proposals and then presenting them to a group of reviewers. I was fortunate enough to be one of the reviewers. So we spent a day in a conference room together, because I think there were 15 or 18 presentations all together. So everyone had a, kind of time when they could pitch their project. The picture on the right actually is a group of middle school students from a local school and their art teacher, who were actually one of the awardees. The picture on the left is a local sculptor, a metal sculptor, who was also one of the awardees. If we go to the next one. So these are the 5 projects that were funded, and they're all really different. The Wedge at Hazel Hill is an existing green space that had a proposal that included a performance stage and green infrastructure rain garden. The Mahoning Avenue Archway is the illumination of a historic bridge connecting the downtown core to an arts district at the edge of the city. We want to go to the next one. Light the Community was our middle schooler project, where the students and their art professor put together this kind of projection system where different imagery could be projected on one of those blank walls. Solar Screen was a collaboration between Kent State faculty and faculty at Youngstown State to create a 3D printed wall structure that had lights embedded into it. It absorbed light during the day and then projected that light out at the end of the day. And then the shipping container bus shelter was our metal worker artist leading that project, where he cut apart a shipping container. And I know you've all seen a million shipping container projects, but in Youngstown, this project had a special resonance because, of course, shipping containers is part of the industrial landscape of Youngstown. So they're easy to find, they're all over the place. And so kind of the project was about cutting apart that geometry and forming it together in a bus shelter. So if we go to the next one. One of the things that I just want to really stress here is important is that when people put together a proposal for your request for proposals, they're putting in a lot of work. It's important to be able to give them something back. Ideally, providing a stipend to participants to develop a preliminary proposal, I think is a really good and ethical thing to do. It's hard to be an artist and to make a living. In this particular case, what we were able to offer the other applicants, because only 5 projects were funded, but 15 were submitted, was a really nice exhibition at the McDonough Museum of Art. It's a small, but really kind of well-regarded, high-profile gallery on the Youngstown State campus. So there was a show that presented the work and was able to give artists some visibility. Not quite as good as cash, but pretty good nonetheless. And some relationships and partnerships kind of bloomed out of that exhibition. If we go to the next, please. So if you were at the session yesterday, I try not to overdo my kind of fondness for metrics, but one of the things that we did is when the projects were awarded to the different teams, we established the evaluation metrics up front so that each of the teams kind of understood, for themselves and for us, what success would look like. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but for every project, the projects were really different. So the evaluation metrics were also different, but doing those at the start rather than at the end can be really helpful. So this actually is what the project for the landscape, the Wedge at Hazel Hill, looked like. If we go to the next one. This is the Mahoning Avenue Arch. It was trickier than it looks to get that one to work, but kind of it's still there, and it cheers people up to see a little bit of brightness connecting the 2 parts of the city. Go to the next. Light the Community. Again, kind of it's so qualitative rather than quantitative, but you can, kind of gauge the number of people who, kind of experience the work. You can monitor. In some of these, you see the metrics talk about time-lapse photography. We really didn't have the capacity to do that here, but I still think it's a good idea. If you can't do time-lapse photography, at least some kind of low-key observation so that you actually see how people are experiencing the site, not just on the opening day, but throughout its life. Next, please. Here's the solar screen, kind of, again, does it function as intended? And these are some of the criteria that we used about whether, kind of it became a useful, engaging part of the streetscape. And next, please. And there's the shelter. I'll tell you what, the shelter was much more beautiful in its natural condition, but the WRTA, which was the organization was very excited to have the structure as part of their transit system, but they insisted on this green color, which is a nice color. But the original patina of the shipping container had much more kind of sort of beauty about it. If we go to the next one. Okay. So now we're going to jump into the breakout group exercise, where we'd like you guys to talk to each other about your own projects, and share kind of your thinking and what you're learning, so that you can kind of make discoveries in groups. Is there anything, Lynn, that else we want to say about that?
Yeah, so at the top of the chat, I actually dropped this slide into the top of the chat so that you could like download it and bring it with you into your great breakout groups. But basically, we'd just love you to have a conversation with these prompts, and take 2 minutes at the beginning to introduce yourself and give a high level description of your project so you can get to know each other a little first. And then just use these as prompts to have a conversation. And what we'd like to do is we don't have facilitators set up for these breakout groups, but if one of you could volunteer at the beginning of the breakout to just sort of be the person who's going to report out from your group when we come back, that would be great. And so, and I guess that's it. Yeah. So, so Joe, I think you can actually just give people time to let's wait 1 second so you guys can download that from the chat, so you can bring it with you. So we'll give you a minute to do that. And then Joe will put you in your breakout rooms.